Hey, what's up, my lovelies? So I'm on my 5th day of psych class. I'm on my lunch break, so I decided to smoke a bone and take a couple hoots of my ketamine nasal spray, which I'll do in a bit. But I wanted to explain to you my hypothesis, and it's just that. I'm like really not recommending anyone actually try this, because again, this is just a theory, but I've laid it out in pretty meticulous detail. I'm just going off the top of my head here. I'm not reading what I actually wrote down, so it probably will be a little less refined than what I had detailed. But I essentially, I believe that a lot of mental illness is a result of trauma that has gone unchecked in children whose young, impressionable brains have been warped by an abuser. And so, due to wanting to avoid the unpleasantries of stuff like this, they, will create, say, a realm of fantasy or fiction, or they will not grow to have a logical circuit in their mind that is wholly complete in a way that allows them to, go, okay, well, this plus this plus this plus this plus this decision will equal this outcome. They'll fill in one part of that mental circuit with something that is not, tenable in the real world. It's not feasible. So I believe that if you were to take these individuals and you were to put them through a screening process, because I do believe, and I've said this before, psychedelics are not for everyone. If you have a history of family mental illness, if you have mental illness yourself that causes psychosis, psychedelics may not be for you. But my theory is that perhaps if even hereditary, this might be able to overturn it if, the primary driving factor behind the mental illness is indeed trauma. Again, I cannot stress this enough, this is speculation at best. So the screening process would entail essentially doing therapy along with rudimentary sensory deprivation. And I've tried this method before, where essentially what you do is you take ping pong balls and you cut them in half and you tape them over your eyes. You play static and you just sit back with a red light over, and that after a while will have your brain starting to try and fill in the blanks and create stimuli of its own. And that's when I think the stuff that this person may be trying to escape from, maybe trying to repress, will start to actually come to the surface. But if they are prone to epilepsy or seizures, then if if they're prone to seizures or psychoses as a result of something like this, then this would be the phase where you'd rule people out of the trial. During this trial, you would also be intermittently giving people placebos, as well as like increasing microdoses of psilocybin, psilocin, 4-HO DMT, basically. Why 4-HO DMT? Because that is the only psychedelic I know of that when you Google it, it says there are no reports of HPPD being caused as just a result of taking psilocybin mushrooms. And HPPD is a very real issue, and you know, it can cause more problems than and these problems can outweigh any potential curative effects that could be had. Now, say these people do pass. The next phase would be to help reclaim their brain. Because the thing is, you know, I would pick the ages for, you know, the study group to be 15 to 19, because that's when the brain is still forming, it's still malleable. And you know, I really want to go on record as saying I do not endorse anyone under the age of, say, 20 to take psychedelics, because I've personally talked to people who have taken nothing but mushrooms and said they have HPPD as a result. Just online, there are no reports of it. You know, that's, at least last time I Googled it, no reports whatsoever. But, you know, why I think you can, sorry, just a little bit of cat. Why I think you know, these traumas are what ultimately metastasize into mental illness is because of like for example, look at the kids of, say, evangelical Baptist families in the States. You know, they have minds that or brains that are still growing, that are still forming, and because of that malleability, they are prone to believing stuff like, oh, demons are out to get you, hell is a real thing, angels are in the sky, sort of thing. You know, personally, I had very vivid hallucinations as a child, and I chalked this up to my brain still forming. And so I think, you know, if you have a traumatized individual, the abuser has taken their brain and it has moved it in a direction, warped their still forming brain in such a way that it has developed this mental illness as a way of coping with the issue. Now, I believe that the protocol should entail essentially doing talk therapy, trying to encourage the individual to take up something like learning a new language, or even a new instrument, a new art form, something that is expressive, and that because, you know, I've heard this theory that learning a new language presents the perspective or presents the individual with a new perspective, a vantage that otherwise they wouldn't have had on the world, because they can see things in a language other than just, you know, the one they knew. And so I think, you know, stuff like music and so forth, where there are structures, there are regiments, there are equations you're making yourself to, you know, complete, say, a song, or, you know, a pattern of chords on guitar, for example. I believe that in itself is like a new language. Now, I think this would help them to reclaim their perspective and their cognizance, and in various intervals between this therapy, I believe, you know, it would, and this is where I think the real healing would come from, it would merit giving these people, you know, psilocybin in sensory deprivation tanks, and guiding them, you know, say through an earpiece or whatever, into the basis of their trauma. So they get down to that seed and they can uproot it and they can reclaim their own brains. And now I get that a lot of people would probably be anxious if they're already mentally ill, so I would suggest maybe administering a benzodiazepine before this, or even, and this may be a little controversial, MDMA and psilocybin, because the MDMA would provide them with a sense of euphoria, and that euphoria would be associated with the victory they have over, you know, looking their traumas right in the eyes, or at least attempting to. Now, the aim of this program would probably, you know, I'm sure there would be people who would fail, who would not learn, say, a new language or instrument, or people who may not overcome their traumas, but, you know, I wouldn't want them walking away with no value whatsoever. So I think it would be of paramount importance to positively reinforce these people to go, hey, you were brave enough to do this and try this and come out as someone who, you know, formerly was, you know, in these places away from reality, to someone who had taken an attempt to tangibly be a part of their reality, and to not only that, attempt to expand their perspective to be even more present in their own reality. I think that kind of motivation would be incredibly important in cases like this. And, you know, that basically is the gist of it. So, you know, to summarize, phase one, which would be the vetting phase, would be, you know, sensory stimulation, or sorry, sensory deprivation, because, you know, the thing that the brain does when one is in a state of sensory deprivation is very similar to what mental illness does. Like when the first white people went to, you know, the poles, they thought they saw ghosts in the mountains, and this was because they're surrounded by nothing but light. And so their brains were scrambling to provide some sort of stimuli that they could consume and feel better about as a result. Now, I think that in this you know, proposed theory, like for when you're doing that first phase, that it's essentially simulating the same thing. It's you know, because I've tried this, I've tried the ping pong balls, the red light, and the static, and everything just seems white. Just seems white. And then you'd administer small amounts, microdoses of psilocybin and whatnot, to make sure there are no adverse reactions. And if there are adverse reactions, you say, you know, sorry, this would probably be more detrimental for you than it would be beneficial, but it was very brave of you to try. So still leave them with some encouragement, even if they don't make it through the first phase. Second phase would be regular therapy, working with them, getting them to understand their thoughts, reclaim their thoughts, confront the source of their trauma and their mental illness, and then that's when you start putting them in a sensory deprivation tank with psilocybin and, you know, potentially benzodiazepines to calm them down beforehand, or MDMA, so they can actually come face to face with their issues. Like, I remember once, I used to have this way of creating sensory deprivation when I did ketamine, when I was prescribed it. And I remember actually going down to hell and looking at the devil, like looking the devil right in the eyes, like classical big red demon with lava under his feet and hooves and all that, and just not feeling scared. And you know, I think I overcame the trauma I had ingrained in me at a young age, when my friend's very evangelical babysitter just pontificated upon us as, 8-year-old, 7-year-old children, because I was 1 year older than my friend, that there were demons out there possessing people. And like in retrospect, what she was describing was essentially people in excited delirium. Oh, my father is an exorcist and he was treating this guy and his eyes were completely black and he threw a table across the room. Well, he was probably in meth psychosis. Like, that's probably what was really happening. But as a child, my brain was still forming. I didn't know stuff like this. I hadn't matured. So she was playing on the gullibility of my youth. And, in this ketamine experience of like looking the devil right in the eyes, even though it felt just like kind of like a holographic projection as opposed to a real devil, it completely stamped out whatever residual pieces of that phobia was in my mind. Now, I believe the same thing would be done with, people in these sensory deprivation tanks. So no sensory stimuli, because a big problem in this world, especially among people my age and younger, is, this inability to be on our own and away from noise and screens, just stimuli. Cultural stimuli it's the name of the game now, is to always has some noise on in the background. Best way of taking it seriously, no doubt. Also very discreet, which good stuff. I do it in class and no questions asked, really. Anyways, I think this would, because especially in people with mental illness, especially types of mental illness that seem to promote depression, or depressive episodes like bipolar, people will be prone to, losing faith in everything, losing faith in themselves, and to have anxiety about doing, just regular things that regular people do. I think that's why, the introduction of something like clinical grade MDMA could help, because it would create a euphoria, and that euphoria would be associated with overcoming those traumas. But to culminate it all, I think this shouldn't be a lifelong type of treatment. I believe this is something that should just be done from the ages of 15 to 19, and then subsequent to that, there would still be periodic check-ins with, say, a psychologist. I prefer psychologists, even though psychologists aren't technically granted the right to dole out medication, which I think is very foolish. Even though I think most psychologists probably would opt not to anyways. But I think with stuff like psychedelic psychology, or psychologists can do a lot more. And another thing about people with depression and stuff like that, like myself personally, is that we're kind of immune to stuff like talk therapy. I never got anything out of just talking about my issues. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel like I had gotten anything off my chest. But when I was on a psychedelic, I had what felt like a tangible association, these visuals and stuff like that felt like they were manifestations of what I was saying, and it was actually getting out there and actually going out into the universe and off of me and off my chest. Now, I think, other than just, throwing them in a tank and giving them drugs, it is important to reinforce their self-confidence and to really talk to them as well. But what I just described is why I believe the psychoactive substances would help in cases like this. Again, theory, I'm not saying do this, I'm saying this is a summary of something I came up with. Now, finally, what would you leave the person with? You know, whether or not they manage to complete it, I think they should still be assigned like cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff like that, which promotes rational thinking, which promotes you know, this reclaiming of one's own mind, and that ultimately grounds the individual and helps the individual to understand the mechanisms that drive whatever mental illness or issue is causing them distress. And so that way, that would give them the tools to be able to broach, you know, an encroaching issue of the past, like, you know, sexual abuse or whatever, you know, after the trials, if it does happen to emerge, by themselves, using techniques they've been taught. So in essence, that's about it. Now, again, I mean, I can't say this enough. This is just an idea I came up with. I am not saying this is a good idea. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I don't know, there's not enough clinical research out there. It is just something I came up with. I thought you may find it interesting. Yeah, let me know what you think. I'm sure this is going to be divisive because, like, even I personally, like, I tell people who are under, you know, 19, 20, not to do anything other than cannabis because their brains are still developing. And, you know, you've got the rest of your lives to do certain drugs. But at the same time, I've seen the lives of people who are mentally ill. And, you know, it's, you know, a life of heavy sedation, living in residential facilities, being, you know, disciplined to a regimen they may or may not like. It's, I think where mental health treatment's at today is, you know, a trapping of one of the biggest modern failures in terms of how we handle it. And it's a sad reality because essentially what, at least in my country, I see is people going, oh, let's just take these people away from society and make sure the insane just stays in this enclosed area, whether they like it or not. We don't care whether they like it or not. It's not our fault. Freudian stuff. Our fault that they're sick. It's you know, they're sick, and it's our job just to keep them away from the rest of the world. And I think that is really unfortunate. And, you know, I think the use of SSRIs and stuff like that, antidepressants, causing this synthetically induced neurochemical response that has a high failure rate and a great degree of side effects that completely derail people's lives is just not the way to go. Especially when even just microdosing psilocybin is something like 60% more effective than SSRIs. SSRIs, which are not even 40% effective, and SSRIs, which also you know, carry black box warnings because they increase suicidal ideations to maximum potential in the first 3 weeks of using them. A lot of them, you know, I've been forced on SSRIs. I know this is a fact, you know, the only times I've ever heard of psychedelics being associated with stuff like suicidal thoughts and whatnot is when people have done very high doses in very bad states of mind, and you know, like essentially just worsen their own condition. And that's something I'm scared of that could happen if, say, my theory was to be put into application. Hence why I'm saying this isn't necessarily a good idea. It's a theory, just an idea, a notion. chew on in your head. Anyways, tell me what you think. Please do subscribe. Please, you know, hit me up with a like. You know, get my views back up there. That would really, really help me. And really, you know, it would add a little spice to my life. And yeah, stay sexy.